we're optimistic. I got to give a lot of thanks to Percy Borough, which is way out in front of this, with a lot of communication with DEP and what's the way forward look like to turn these old vacant buildings into adaptive reuse structures. So we think the way is open to make this happen. There's a lot of stakeholders still in the process of developing what the end game is going to look like, but in your presentation I have for you tonight, we have what will be the land development plans for the 80 units on this side of the street. The things up in the air will not, for the most part, affect the layout of the units, the types of units they are. And if you look to the back of the presentation in the slides, you'll see this is an entry-level housing in no stretch of the imagination. These are upscale, beautiful, well-done residential units with exposed features, lots of light, lots of existing architectural features available for view and use in the building. It's something that's really going to be, as you know from being residents in our area, going to be such a vast improvement to that entire area from 5th Street on up to 7th Street. So with that, I will be quiet and ask if there are any questions. You've had a long night already. Okay.
So unlike the first proposal from the airport, though, this does impact the school district in the sense of bringing, presumably, more students.
You know what, Dr.
Unclear how many.
I'm not quite sure about that. My kids aren't having any kids. I don't know. Millennials don't seem to be occupying their residential units with as many as we did. I know across the street from my office, you know, the 3-story brick building that got done 2 years ago. I think there's 7 units in there. I've yet to see a child walk out of it. We're seeing a lot of millennial people working up and down the pike, coming into the community. So I don't know what your demographics look like. I don't have that information, but I don't think we can count on the same kind of numbers that you would see a generation ago with 1 and 2 bedroom units and studios. But thank you.
How many units will be in this?
80.
80 units?
Yes.
81 and 2-bedroom units is what you're saying?
Studio, 1 and 2 bedroom.
Okay. And what's the time frame for it to be built? Like when would it be from?
Work in progress, but right now we're hopeful to start the land development. We plan to start the land development process and the DEP approval process in 2018. Percy's already shown a lot of support, so I anticipate we'll be through that process in 2018. Whether that gets us to construction in the months following that really is going to be a function of how the rest of these stakeholders come in terms of how it ends up shaking out with both DEP, the tax structure, the historical side of the structure, which we're trying to get some recognition of. So that's a little bit up in the area.
And has the borough already approved the LERTA?
They have not, but as you've seen from their support tonight, they're actively cooperating with what's necessary to get this project back into adaptive reuse. And in that regard, Stephen Barth has been critical in bringing people together in conversation.
And when, a similar question was asked before, but when would you need to know from the school district?
We're, of course, as soon as you've got your questions answered, but sooner in terms of later, in terms of putting together what we're going to be able to do with this project would be appreciated.
So what would be the latest that you would need to know?
A couple of months would be preferred.
Okay, thank you.
And if there's any information that you don't have from us, we'd be more than happy to provide it to you or come back again to a school board and answer questions.
Do you have something similar as far as what you anticipate? Is that in there?
The layouts?
No, well, what you anticipate the tax is to be after it's developed.
I think Stephen can give you a general answer that question.
Yeah, the current taxes on the Delbar property are $40,000 a year. And based on the other work that I've done with Mr. Cassidy and Hatboro, you know, that's a factor of 10. So, you know, you would anticipate $400,000, you know, when it's fully restored. And then the other question about children, the other 2 projects I work on in Hatboro. The one that's completed has 160 units, and I think they have fluctuates between 10 and 15 students in the district. And that's because most of the tenants are either millennials or empty nesters, so it's not really young families moving into those buildings.
I have a question. Michael, hi.
Hi.
Are these are apartments, or are these to be owned?
No, they're owned.
By individual families?
Apartments all owned? I'm sorry, I misspoke, apartments.
Okay, and the reason for my question is because it's not my understanding that LERTA could apply to individual homes owned by the homeowner. But these are apartments to be owned by an apartment
This is the development team right here.
company and leased to homeowners, basically. All right.
Apologize.
So wait, are they apartments or are they condos?
No apartments.
They are apartments.
Other questions, ladies and gentlemen?
So you have one, you spoke of one in Haber or Horsham that was completed and has,
Two.
Two.
Yeah. Mhm.
what's the occupancy on them?
The first project is called Hatboro Lofts. So if you look that up online, you'll see that's beautiful. And some of the images I included on the packet in front of you, that's from the completed Lofts project. They are 100% occupied all the time. So some of the attraction of it in Hatboro, at least, is they're 2 blocks from, we have a rail station in Philadelphia. And then Mr. Cassidy's second project, first one's 160 units, the second one is 85. It has underground parking, which the Delbar property will have underground parking. And some of the things, internationally, what's good about this kind of project is you're redeveloping the downtowns, you're not creating sprawl. So what it does is it preserves the natural beauty surrounding the campus here. So and the property across from Mr. Kraft's law firm was an old tobacco factory in the borough, and that was repurposed same way. It was like just an abandoned factory, and now it's these beautiful high-end apartments. So it's a very positive impact, I think, for the community on many, many levels here. And it supports our downtown redevelopment as well, because it's 2 blocks from that. So, creating the new jobs up at the airport in turn supports all this other housing development. And we have development at multiple tiered levels. So the Delbar thing is high-end apartments. So that's like young millennials, they're managers. And then, they shop downtown, so it creates this whole bubble of prosperity.
I just want to say I'm familiar with your Hatboro Loft condos apartments down there. I remember when they were being built. I have family down there, and my family was concerned about that. And over the years, they've kept their name, and they've been very well maintained. So from just kind of being the outsider and observing, didn't realize who they were, but they were really maintained. So I think that'd be great downtown for visitors.
I just have a question about the environmental impact. Did you say you resolved those already?
Well, that's a dumb thing, keep going on. No is the honest, short answer. When I was borough solicitor, DEP and EPA in combination worked through nearly 20 years of assessment, testing, and observation of the TCE problem that starts at a 3-mile wide swath up on Ridge Road and funnels down through that creek, runs beside Penn Community Bank, under the trestle, beside this property, down to the perk. EPA in 2004, and you can look on the site yourself, determined that the TCE problem was created off-site, required that the on-site wells continue to be monitored, and that's where that ended with EPA. Penn Community, during the Act 2 program, in conjunction with Percy Borough, Redevelopment Authority of Bucks County, did the same thing, took it successfully through the Act 2 program and got an Act 2 release. DEP recently has determined that they want us to do some additional observation of the issues, And that's where we are right now. We have a draft plan in front of DEP for their review and approval. We have an environmental consultant engaged, and we're in the process of developing those conversations. If you know anything about TCE, and I know about that much, it's a forever kind of problem. It's a heavy metal that sinks to the bottom of the aquifer, and it's fortunate in that area and in most of this area we have public water. And except for vapor testing, which is an active requirement of this property, there's no known health hazard that EPA or DEP is interested in. So one of the conditions of DEP's Act 2 approval was that the vapor barrier remain in place on the property. And that's an environmental covenant that you can actually find online.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do want to thank you for bringing up the point about redeveloping things that we already have existing within our towns instead of sprawling outward. I appreciate that very much.
I got my start in this community as Percy Borough's zoning hearing board solicitor in 1986. And one thing I got fond of saying to the zoning hearing board is all our communities have to show flexibility if we're going to remain vital, because it's easier not to develop where you can't find that, where that flexibility does not exist. And for a long, long time, that was the case in a lot of our communities. Thankfully, that's changed in terms of finding collaborative voices throughout the stakeholders in these projects, because that's what it takes. It was said very well. If that doesn't happen, then they go somewhere where that kind of thing does happen. It is a competition. Anyone else?
Thank you for your presentation. So I presume we will also plan to put this on the March meeting unless, and that's March 26th, by the way, unless board members object to it or have more questions. But frankly, everyone should get their questions submitted between now and then, well before that meeting, so that it can either be put on the agenda or not put on the agenda if too many board members object to it. Okay? Let's move on to the next item tonight. I'm sorry.
With your permission, Mr. James Purcell, who's one of our council members, would like to comment on this, if that's possible.
Okay, please make it
Just
short,
give me a couple
Mr.
minutes.
Purcell.
Good evening, Jim Purcell, Percy Borough Council. My wife is a graduate of Pennridge High School. She was the first woman to graduate with a mechanical design class. The teachers wouldn't let her take it. She had to fight them because she was a woman. Back in the 60s, they wouldn't let women do that, you know. And of course, then she went on to Bucks County Community College, and she was the first woman to graduate with a real estate degree. My son is a graduate of this high school. He went on to Penn State. Now he's an architectural engineer. My sister's an engineer, went to this high school. So we paid a lot of taxes to Pennridge over the years, but it's a good school. But I'm speaking for myself tonight, not for Borough Council. I'm just one person of 9. But I'm excited, as well as the rest of the council is very excited about these two projects. With Mr. Brink's project, it's a warehouse. It won't have any children in it. But you guys will continue to get taxes. And we understand that. But if he hires 100 people and 50 of them build houses and buy houses in Pennridge, you're going to get the tax anyway. Now, I'm also a landlord. And the tenants that I have seen over the last 10 years are either singles or young couples that don't have kids. And then they leave the apartments and they go and buy a house, and that's when they start having kids. So that's, you know, so I'm confirming the fact that I see it firsthand, that most of the apartments that I deal with are singles or, you know, young couples. But as I said, I'm very excited about these two projects, and hopefully you can be too. Thank you.
Sir, I have a question for you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me what the borough's schedule for creating a LERTA ordinance that applies to these two projects is?
Well, we didn't see it yet. When we get that presentation, we're going to take action on it as soon as we can.
So Dr. Yarnell, can I make a suggestion? Before putting this on the board's agenda firm in March, why not wait to see what the borough eventually decides to do? That it might be at least a reference point for the board. It does, you don't have, the board, as I said, the board doesn't have to wait. It can move ahead with this or not move ahead with it within its discretion, but the borough is here, suggesting that this is a good approach. Maybe one approach would be to wait for them to act and then provide this board with, the ordinance and whatever agreement it's entered into with the property owners. That'll give this board a frame of reference. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think we could take the lead on the project. The only thing, our borough manager is heading out on maternity leave pretty shortly. But yes, we could take the lead, and then we can work with our solicitor direct to you to help craft that together. Does that sound good?
That sounds fine to me.
The agenda for that meeting, for the March 26th meeting, needs to be in place by the 21st, which is a Wednesday.
Okay.
So that's kind of the deadline, otherwise it will move to an April or later meeting.
Okay. I'll work on our end to get some kind of decision to you ahead of that time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, contracts for approval. We have 8 of them tonight.
Can I request that these people stay to answer questions from the public?
Well, you can ask them to stay, but it's really their choice, not mine.
Okay? I would like for y'all to answer questions, but it's up to you.
At this point, though, we are going to go forward with these contract potentially for approval. So there are 8 of them. Mr. Delbar, can you summarize what they are?
No, I want to hear from the business.
I sure can. Okay, the first 2, A and B, are Kids Piece. These are for tutorial services for students that are placed in medical facilities. C and D are both for Spanish Sign Language interpreters for students placed at the PA school for the deaf and need to be placed by the school district in order to meet the educational needs of the student. E is Delta T Group. This is another nursing contract. This is another company that we are attempting to get nurses to act as substitute nurses in our buildings, also on field trips, and also on our school buses for medically fragile students. Again, another contract that needs to be in place so that we're meeting the needs of the students and not violating their FERPA. F is Education Incorporated, another educational services contract for a student that's in a medical placement. And G is MedFlex Incorporated. This company has been working with the district for the last 3 years to pick up and remove our medical waste and dispose of that properly. They've offered another 3-year contract to the district at no increase in cost, same cost as the last 3 years. So Jeff likes this company. They work very well with us. They're very responsible, and we're recommending that we renew them at the same cost that they've been working with us at. So that's the contracts.
So are there any questions about these contracts that board members would like to ask? I will make just one comment, which I discovered and probably missed in previous rounds. The Education Inc. contract is for $45.50 an hour, but there is an upcharge on that, which is listed as basically 33% of that occurs regardless. It's part of the preparation time. So in effect, it's a higher cost than the $45.50.
Right, for every 3 hours of education time, there's 1 hour added for prep time. And that, I did go back to previous contracts, and it is in there.
I assumed so, but in reading it, it kind of jumped out at me because it's not hidden, but it's definitely among the more fine print versus the upfront, this is what the cost is.
Correct.
Okay, so hearing and seeing no comments or objections, we'll move those to the agenda for the next board meeting on the 26th. The next item on the agenda is the review of the Bucks County Intermediate Units 2018-2019 Program and Services and Instructional Materials and Research Services Budget. They really should make an acronym out of this. Mrs. Miller, maybe you could work on that.
I'll talk to them.
This is the part of the IU budget that each and every year the board here gets to vote on. The IU budget is approximately, and don't quote me, but it is approximately $140 million a year. This budget obviously is less than $1.8 million of that. But it is a part that impacts us directly, and it consists of two parts. The whole document was there, all 66 pages, as we usually get. But on the pages around page 36, 7, and 8 is where the nitty-gritty, at least in terms of the cost, arises. And there are two parts to that cost. One's the budgeted contribution, and one's the actual purchased services part. Our numbers for that would be in the 18-19 year, a total of $82,049, which is actually a decrease of $391 over what we are paying this year. So this budget is actually, on the whole, going up about 2.93%, $50,646, but the portion that we are actually paying is going down. So I'm recommending that we pass this. We don't have to have it back to the IU till the 28th. Are there questions or comments that people would like answered tonight, all of which I'll defer to Mrs. Miller since she's representing us at the IU? But this is something that we are asked to do each and every year, and there is a deadline on it.
I did just want to add that the cost did go down to the districts, although the cost went up, and that was through their entrepreneurial activities that brought the costs down to the districts. So even though the costs are rising, the districts are all paying less. So kudos again to the IU.
And this is a part of school code that school districts annually pass this part of the IU's budget. It has to be passed by a certain number of the sending districts within the IU and a certain number of the school board members within the IU. So it is part of school code, and that's why they ask us, send it to us each year and ask us to do it.
Okay, if there are no questions, this too could be on the agenda on February 26th. The next item is the review of the 2017, I assume this is the 2017-18 bids or the 2018-19 bids?
This would be a very good catch. This is for our 18-19 bids.
Okay.
To go out to bid.
Right.
Getting ready for next year.
Right. So these are bids and RFPs. I believe the list is exactly the same as it has been in the last few years. Obviously, they're items A through H, as you can see. Many of these are recurring supplies that the district uses and needs. So again, are there questions or comments about this list?
I just wonder again, and I know we ask this question every year, why are we still paying for planners when they all have laptops? Does anybody have an answer to that one?
Oh, the agendas.
Do they have the holes in them still?
Well, I know we've decreased the number, but
I know, it just
are they
seems,
still?
We have, and I think what it comes down to is some students, and Dr. Price, maybe you can add to this as well, some students just like that hard copy, and even though we've gone to the other model, we want to make that available to them. And don't forget, elementary schools, you don't have
well, they're not using planners.
homework, planning
Yeah.
books.
When I was in elementary school, I remember we used to have to get our planner signed every night that we got our homework done.
Oh, okay.
But when I have talked to the students about planners versus laptops, all of the ones that I've talked to always use their planners versus their laptops. And they really do like them and use them. And I talk, I don't know, 15, 20, maybe more, and they tell me their opinions of their friends. So they like their planners, and it's important for them to have those skills, not just rely on technology all the time. Just my opinion.
Based on my experience, I don't think the high school students do get planners. No, I mean,
Okay.
yeah,
I
so,
feel
I mean,
a little
none of my
better.
high school students have been given a planner. I mean, I know at least one of them would like a planner if it was available, but I don't know that it is available. But I believe that the middle school students, because they don't take their,
They don't take it home.
they
I
don't take any of the
understand that.
computers home, so then they would have a planner. And I do believe, I mean, that they also use them as a, like a hall pass, I think, the planner, at least when my kids were there, so.
Yeah, the high schools, you're correct, Mrs. Yard, the high school's online now only, so they do not purchase them for the high school. So I would say the biggest bang for our buck here is at the middle school level.
All right.
Where they're using them for multiple things, and accountability, you're right, Mrs. Dolan, is a piece of that. Oftentimes, teachers are telling students they must get something initial, especially if someone's not turning in assignments, let's say. It's another strategy, academic strategy for organization that way. And it also kind of has the student handbook piece at the beginning as well, so all the rules and regulations are in that as well.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
I would just tell you that under transportation supplies and equipment, we'll be looking for bids for brake parts, and engine and transmission parts, vehicle batteries, vehicle fluids, and shock fluids, transportation two-way radio maintenance, and to be a part of the IU-22 vehicle tire bids for new and recaps, and also the IU-22 fuel bids for gasoline and diesel fuel, and also looking for quotes for the summer bus washing. And under Jeff's operations, facilities and operations, we'll be bidding HVAC filters, lamps and ballasts, maintenance and transportation uniforms, custodial uniforms, and trash removal this year. So it's just a number of things that that'll be coming to you as part of those bids.
So we will be putting a motion for this on the
Yes.
February 26th meeting agenda as well. Okay, the last thing on tonight's Finance Committee is the budget update.
All right. The presentation will be on your laptops, and I'll go down here and do the. Tell us what's like. I will do that, and they don't know.